So next up, we have our next speaker. That's how next works. Megan's going to chat to us about unlocking data, but not your privacy.
Thank you. Hi everyone, thanks for joining me on International Women's Day. I'm delighted to be able to present here today. So my presentation is unlocking data, not your privacy. We're going to look at the key to open and secure sharing. Now first, a little bit about me. So when I started university, I studied maths and computer science. I just graduated the past July, but I'm doing a part-time cyber master's at the minute. So I've worked as a data engineer over the last 3 years at a few different companies. And my main interest area are kind of privacy, AI, and any data systems. And I'm very glad to have my family in the audience today who came up to support me for this. So today we're going to be discussing data. Big data especially. We're going to look at data decisions that are made using big data, and we're going to look at anonymity. Does it actually exist in today's world? And then we're going to finish with some takeaways and protections. So when I see big data, I think, what actually is big data? It's a pretty ominous word. Sometimes it sounds cool, like, oh, look at all this big data I have, or I've got loads of big data. But what actually makes data big? So we kind of look at 3 different things for this. We look at volume. How much data is there? Is there a lot? And we look at how much the data is coming in. So how frequently we're getting this data. We then look at variety. So are we getting lots of different types of data? We've got semi-unstructured, or we've got complete nonsense of data. It's just like images. And then we kind of look at how often it comes in, the velocity, the frequency of it. Now, big data is actually in this room today. All of us contribute to this data collection that is happening. So how much data every day is being collected on us? Now, it's around 1.7 gigs. And if anyone's like me in the audience, I have no way of visualizing this. I always have to go get another example. So that's around 850,000 pages of text. Imagine all that data on you every day. It's just under 2,500 copies of 1984. It's a massive amount of data that is being collected. But what's happening with this data? So people who are taking our data are making £26 per day off of us. So the way this works is they collect our data and then they sell it on. Or the people they've sold it on to then use our data to drive decisions. And this happens very quickly, often in seconds. Say you've picked up a data from a search engine, say you're looking for a new car, and then you get an advert for a new car. If you click that advert, that advertiser gets money. So every day, £26 is made between selling our data and any decision we do acting on it. But what exactly is the data they're taking? So we have an app called Angry Birds. It was the top free game in the UK and the US charts. Now, Angry Birds is just a game where people play for fun to pass the time. But every time you didn't have the game opening, Angry Birds was collecting who you're phoning, what music you played, and tracking your location. Now, what would Angry Birds need to know with the music I listened to? It was just selling it on. So the answer is these apps and these companies will take everything and anything they can get their hands on. Now, Angry Birds came to light because the data they were selling to was the US government. The US government was forming a surveillance network through Angry Birds. And it was completely unknown for years, and the court cases only started in 2021 to properly look at this. So with all this data that's being sold, especially Angry Birds, who is buying this? Where is it going? How are these transactions happening? So welcome to the data cafe. So this is how they get all of our data. This is kind of what's on the market for us. So people will go looking specifically for different types of data. Our first one is browser trails. So when we kind of log on to any website, they're monitoring our mouse movements. They're looking to see, are you moving really fast? Or are you stopping over a product? Because you may be interested in that product, you're just undecided yet. It's very valuable metrics. They're going to look at our biometric keys. So this one is coming up more and more. Recently, Subway asked if I'd like to add my fingerprint to open the app for a loyalty card. And then they asked, do I trust Subway? No, I don't trust Subway with my biometric keys, in fact. More and more, it was initially our thumbprint, and now it's our face print. And now it's you can do it with your eyes as well. It's getting more and more for different styles of data, especially biometric that's not fully secure just yet. And then we've got stuff like public data. So we've got our name tag and our social interactions. So say we're using Facebook and Instagram and we like a post. Everyone can see we've liked that post. We know what we're doing is public. So we have some sort of understanding that, yes, this data is public, I'm happy for it to be out there. And then kind of any online shopping too is a very valuable market. So you've got what you do buy and what you don't buy. Say you add loads of stuff to your shopping cart. They're storing that information. Just because you didn't buy it, it's not a data point. And they will use that to further influence ads for you. Now, with the data cafe, you always have cookies as well. So these are when you go on a website and you hit accept. It's picking up all of your background information, how long you stay on that website. Now, who's the most loyal customer at the data cafe? Who's stamped out the most loyalty cards? Experian. So Experian are a credit check company. You might be thinking, credit checks, that's so American. Why are credit checks important here? But they're slowly creeping into decisions that are made over here. Recently, I've been asked for 2 credit checks, one for insurance and one for my rental property. Now, it would be okay, except for the fact that I know Experian is gathering and buying so much data on me. They're looking at my online shopping. They're looking at all the loyalty programs. They're looking at how often I purchase frequency goods. They're looking at my social media. They're looking at my political leanings. They're looking at my travel patterns. They're looking at where I go frequently, and they're looking at my health data. And all of this data is being used to decide, should that person be financially able to get a house? And especially in this market where the supply is greater, the demand is greater than the supply, these checks are starting to get in. It's another kind of layer of criteria that has been added to hit. But what happens when it has all of this data? When it's creating an algorithm with so much different types of data that you don't even know is being harvested and given to them, when you get no decisions, when you're told no, you're not approved, or you get a low score, you can't fully break this down. Are you fully certain that you've not been given a low credit score because of your social media? So it's really difficulty, especially with black box companies when they do their algorithms, to know what data they have and what data is influencing their decisions. So within that pot that Experian has that is making decisions and we can't tell what it is, that's the same with everyone in the room. So if all of our data is being put in one place, you could probably think I'm pretty anonymous, you know, everything's in there, so is everyone else's. They are hardly going to find me. It's not going to be easy to find me in a big, large data set. But the answer is we can really see you. Can we find you in that data set? Can we fully take out all of your information and then go to another place and get more information? Well, this summer there was a famous TikTok soundbite where this girl was looking for a man in finance, 6'5", blue eyes, trust fund. So to help her search, she visited the data cafe with those list of requirements. So our barista got right to work. You know, he was looking for, sorry, I was just checking it uploaded. So her first requirement was a man. Now that's around 20.5 million in the UK. We did 18 to 65 because she's looking for a working man. So, but that's quite a lot. That's still quite a lot of people, you know. However, when we go on to our next, how many of them work in finance? That's only 753,000. Now, do you see how big that number dropped with only one filter being put on it? 20.5 million to that. So already our pool is getting a lot smaller. And we've not even checked the male to female ratio, which is 60% of it. And then we're left with under 500,000. So next we're going to look at trust fund. So less than 1% of the UK population holds a trust fund. This is very low. So again, you can see our data is immediately dropped down to 4,277. And we still have 2 more categories to go. So 6'5". Now this one surprised me. Less than 0.5% of the UK population are 6'5" and over. So it's not looking good that we are on 17 and we only have one filter left. But you'll be glad to know 42% of the population have blue eyes. So when our data barista kind of filtered through the data, got all the records that matched for Megan here, we actually only had 7 candidates. So it's very easy when you have a big pile of data to filter all the way through. And do you see how low it can get? 7 is an extremely low number. And we don't even know if they're single. We haven't checked that for her. So that's an important fact. Make sure you're specific in your data or you won't get the right answers. But this is also assuming that they're all independent of each other. So we're not assuming that people who are blue eyes are more likely to be 6'5". So we're assuming everything is individual. But when you're doing algorithms and machine learning, we have to assume their individual features for the model. But within that 7, can we get a name? Can we go out there and find who the 7 people are? So this is where we're going to start to talk about anonymity. Does it exist? Can I, from a number in a data set, get your name, get any more information on you? So I'm going to talk about a few different ways that we can kind of approach this solution. So we have Strava. So in 2013, Strava introduced heat maps. It did a massive update with 13 trillion data points. And when you logged onto the app, you could see recent routes, you could try compete with other people. But what had happened is they didn't actually look further than the fun concept of it. They didn't go, well, how can this data be malused? So one of the most kind of important aspects of this was the mapping feature. And you may see a map here. Now, this map is actually a military base, a top secret military base in the middle of the desert. So Strava didn't know army people were using their data. That's okay. But when it was looking at the routes, it didn't also look at any strange routes that may have appeared. So 2 top secret military bases were exposed with the Strava data. Now, the interesting point about this were people were able to spoof their location to the army base and run for 0 seconds. They were able to enter fake data. And when they did that, they were able to get the name, heart rate, and running speed. It was like a leaderboard of people who completed that route. So imagine having an app on your phone where you're tracking your health and you're tracking your fitness for fun. And you just get compromised fully by routes that you didn't even know was going to happen. Now, this is a very extreme example, but as a woman myself, if I was running a route and Strava uploaded it, I'd be so afraid if people were going onto routes and seeing where women run more. You know, it wasn't fully thought out of this one. So this is kind of an example of when you enter fake data to get more data. Now, the example I'm going to talk to you a little bit more in depth today is the US Census. So here we've got Latanya Sweeney. So she's the head of Harvard's Data Privacy Lab. And she discovered that she could identify 87% of the US Census participants. Now, how this worked was the US Census, medical data, and voter registration all used 3 identifiers. So with the census, they thought it was enough to have names removed and some other factors changed. But the zip code, date of birth, and gender were the same. Then Natanya went to kind of medical records, where the only thing removed was her name. These were for research purposes. These were used to kind of garner academia kind of scientific purposes. So all of that information was still contained, just except her name. And that's a free data set people could look. However, voter registration is a paid data set, but that has your name. So do you see how quickly we can combine data sets and you get lots more information? So once you were able to combine the medical data with the voter registration, it gave enough information for Latanya to go back to the census and get a 3rd data set and pull it. And there's over 50 rows of data that she could use to re-identify people in the US. She sent the mayor of Alabama his entire medical history, and that actually inspired the HIPAA laws the year after. But this sort of thing is happening day to day too, because it's very hard to have a unique ID column that is not in another column that someone else is using that is open. You know, the US Census has been very kind of open and proud about how it's approached its privacy, and it invited lots of people like Latanya to come and test its data set. The US has a strong sense of privacy. It has lots of papers on it. The Roe versus Wade was actually privacy in the home, the right to privacy in the home that the abortion was built on. So it was built into their culture fundamentally that privacy should be preserved. But how did the US Census do that from year to year? So at the start in 1930s, it started removing kind of small geographic areas. So these are kind of defined by landmarks. So say if a town was cut by a river or a town kind of had a mountain in between it, you could kind of see the small mountains. However, the US then had a boom of population growth. And in the 70s, they had to change how they approached this because there's now commuter towns, there now was suburbia. Towns were now not defined by geographic landmarks. They were not settled by these kind of old ways of you're beside a port to get out quicker. It was a lot different. So they decided to do number of people in households to kind of save these satellite towns of communities. But this was still not information. They were still losing quite a lot of information. Around 10 to 15% of the data, of the census data was being removed. But this data is used to influence your federal records, where the funding goes, Congress seats. It's very important and it has to be public. So in the 1990s, it introduced data swapping. So what this meant was it would look at 2 data entries that were very similar and swap them. And they were hoping by swapping something that was similar, you're not really losing a lot of accuracy, but you're preserving privacy. Now, this was okay up until 2013, 2014, 15-ish, when people had started to use the census records for kind of bad practice, bad state actors. people were using the census records from 2 previous years. So the first year they were monitoring gender, and the second year when they overlapped the data set, if there was a gender change, some groups of people would go out and target that house. So trans youth were especially at risk from this data set. Now, out of the 871 people that were identified from the change in gender, only 1 in 7 of those people were trans. So people who had had their data swapped were being targeted. So it really wasn't the way to go forward. Now, especially all of this stuff with data privacy and data swapping, all of this information was freely available a year ago. However, under Trump, all the DEI stuff has been removed from the census records. So it's now very hard to go back and get all this kind of primary foundation material of why they protected the data and cases where it went wrong. Now, it wasn't until the 2020 census where differential privacy was trialled. However, also under Trump, the census was cut 6 weeks early. So he missed out on a massive number of applicants. So it's very hard to see if this was success or if it wasn't. But a little bit more about differential privacy. So what happens is, imagine you have people like Experian. This time they can't see the data. They can't see when they get the data, what is being put into it. And what we're putting into it is low noise. Lots and lots of random noise. You know, they're not going to be able to tell what record is right and what record isn't. It's like a Turing test kind of, but it's very hard to say what is real data and what isn't. Now, this in concept is very, very, very good in the sense that it gives you plausible deniability. So say if your data, if you're saying something that you'd like protected and someone comes to your house and goes, well, you said this in your census. They could just go, well, maybe that was a random record. Maybe that wasn't me. And they have no way of seeing, well, we don't actually know if that was you or not. So it allows people to openly share their data in a secure way. Now, what this kind of looks like in a graph-wise is, so we have our bell curve here, which is a normal distribution. And then we add both positive and negative noise to it. So in the bottom, you can kind of see the difference. I've got dashed lines here that show 90% of the data. So you can kind of see that it follows the same trend. However, our extremities, kind of the minorities of the data, are really impacted by this. So it doesn't change the statistics or probability of an event occurring by much. So what this means is we're kind of in a trade-off between accuracy and privacy. It's a sliding scale, so we can decide if we want more accuracy or if we want more privacy. Now, we can't just look at the data and be like, well, let's have more privacy in it or let's have more accuracy. We need to fundamentally think of how we're examining the data. So instead of saying, oh, we need to have this percentage of accuracy to give funding to the department, we need to start moving our data kind of examinations to thresholds. So I need to hit a 60% threshold for funding. I need to use the data that I have to kind of not work in machine learning models, but to have humans go through it as well and make informed decisions. So when you have this kind of model, you need to look at the end goal. You need to be constantly looking at the end goal. We can't be looking at the data without looking at what we need to do for it. And kind of the trade-off between accuracy and privacy is something that we've not kind of found a perfect medium yet. You know, for some statistics, you'd need high accuracy. Say if you're looking at medical data, you probably can't put a lot of privacy in that. But if you're looking at something that's like attendees at an event, you know, you probably could. It just doesn't change the number on it. But how does this work with census records? There's some areas of concern. So the first one is illogical statements. What if we had a negative population? What if negative noise then gave us kind of something that didn't make sense? So the census record went through all of the data and kind of provided a lookbook of, well, if I get a negative population, what do I do? So I go to the census records website, I put in what data I'm looking at, and if I'm looking at 2 or 3 kind of data types, I type them all in. They've got columns to select. And then I write my problem. I say, oh, it's negative when it shouldn't. And when I put the data in, it in the back end turns it back to something that's nonsensical. So they have stuff to undo the privacy if you're looking for something more accurate. Now, this is okay, but it was a lot of kind of work on their end to get everything back to being logical. There was only one kind of illogical statement that they couldn't decide on how to fix, which was a small kind of village of people where they were all under 18. Obviously, you've got adults in the village, but they couldn't decide what was the best approach. Do we then submit new data for it, or do we just kind of separate it or remove it from the data set? So the 2030 kind of consultation for differential privacy is up, and you can go look at all the illogical statements and you can think, well, how would I deal with that? How would I change that? Now, the most important one is minority groups are affected disproportionately. So see in the top, if I add noise in, That's a large amount of noise in a small set of data. Whereas when I have a big group, you kind of may not notice it. So it's really important, especially in the US, to protect kind of minority groups from re-identification. But we've not actually found a way to do that yet. We've not found something secure enough where we can gather the accuracy of the data, but make sure people are safe within their data too. Now, I know that my talk might be kind of scary in some senses of how much data has been gathered on us, but data privacy is only new. You know, it's not something that's been discussed as much in depth anymore. There's not a lot of protections on it, especially. We have GDPR and the Digital Privacy Act, but unfortunately, although that's a really good regulatory framework, the companies are absorbing the fines just like operating costs. The fines are not deterring people from following the rules as well. You'll see TikTok, you'll see Meta, you'll see these big corporations always in the news, always getting fined, but there's actually no kind of change underneath. It's very easy to link seemingly anonymous data back to the source, which is you. There's lots of data sets out there and lots of data on you. And if any of that got public in a data breach, it'd be very concerning if it could directly link back to you. There's been quite a lot of targets on healthcare recently. And healthcare data, there was a conversation a few years back to change, well, do we still need to do the census? Because the NHS has all the data on us that the census has. So that's how much data is in the NHS. So people are thinking, well, if the census data got out, what about the NHS? That's the exact same amount of data. And then there's no agreed standards or universal approaches. So this is all still being kind of discussed. There's lots of conversations on it. The UK Census is doing it very differently. They're looking at creating artificial data sets so that none of the data is right. It just kind of resembles it. It's like a skeleton, like a fake, all of it is fake data. So here are some kind of protections for you to go and take away. So insert your own noise and randomness. If you suspect that one app is linked to the other, why don't you go onto Facebook or go onto Google and Google toothbrush? Set a timer on your phone and see how long it takes you to get an ad for toothbrush. See how long it takes you. When people are like, oh, I swear my car was listening to me, or I swear I just mentioned that. Well, why don't you trial it and see what is picking up around you? Say if you say something in your car, well, is it your phone picking it up or is there something in your car? Do you have a smart car? So don't think that you're being crazy or a conspiracy theory. If you think something is linked, just try it out and time it. Say no to cookies all the time. I feel like as a culture, we kind of go, yes, accept. We're very warm and open. And whereas it's very hard to understand when you say no to cookies, you're still going to get the same resource. So how is it when you say yes or no, you're going to get the same resource? There's not a lot of education on that. And you know, some companies try to subvert it by if you say no, you have to go manually select everything. Unmanually select everything. You know, that's the best possible option. And if you're kind of signing up for stuff, create a fake online identity. Choose a random name, choose Carmel, and put in fake data about you. You know, M&S or Tesco do not need to know your real name, but they're collecting lots of data on you. So just create this kind of fakeness. You don't have to give anyone your name except a government official. So don't do that. And then the most important one is set up privacy settings for others. If you've got kids or parents, just go to their phones and look at their apps and see what their apps are accessing, especially games like Angry Birds and any kids games. See, are they looking at locations in the background? Especially kind of if you've got parents or grandparents. They may have downloaded an app and not kind of understand what has been picked up on. It's really important that we who are very technology, like we can go do tech stuff to go help other people set up their tech and set up their privacy. I would especially go, if you have young kids on TikTok and YouTube, to sit down and watch their algorithms for 5-10 minutes. See what they're watching, see what's being recommended in their algorithms. And if you don't, set up a fake account, set up a new account and see how quickly, if you're on YouTube or TikTok, how extreme it goes. I said it took 5 minutes for me to get a far right American video on YouTube Kids. It's very quickly for the pipeline to kind of drastically change. And we're not going to see it unless we're not monitoring our kids, but also watching alongside them. So I think we should shut down the data cafe. I don't think we should give them any more data. Make sure it goes out of business. Talking about the mom rule earlier, I put in an image of a mouse and asked my mom, do you think this is funny? And she went, no, please don't include it. It's so unfunny. So she's not going to be happy when I go back up. But if you scan my QR code, I'm not gathering your data for £26 a day. It would be a great business venture for me, but I'm not. It just has my LinkedIn and it has the women who lead data privacy. Their foundation of data privacy is led by women. You've got Latanya Sweeney, the person who invented differential privacy was a woman. It's all women that are in this field kind of talking about it. So I've linked some of their profiles so you can go follow them. I've also linked a campaign at the end called Big Brother Watch UK. It's on Instagram, and what this is doing is talking about all the privacy stuff that's happening in the UK Parliament at the minute. And if anyone has any questions about privacy or AI or data or surveillance, yeah.
There's mic coming that side.
Hey, Megan. Can you go back to your takeaway slide for me? The one at the bottom where it says no great standard or universal approaches, that's today. What would the future look like if those were in place?
So if we had an agreed universal framework, I don't think we'd have one for the US and Europe especially. But if we have one individually and they link together and they have agreed links, what I can see is that happening is that companies are removed from taking our data. They're not allowed to make any data decisions. So take, for example, insurance in America. It's illegal not to quote the lowest they can quote, and they can only use data regarding your car. They can't use data like Experian was using for your political leanings. So we need a lot more policing on kind of what data people are using for decisions and a lot more transparency. We have kind of ethical AI frameworks coming in, and one of them is transparency about decisions. But this is all happening in the discussion. We're not going to have these in regulations for a while, but I think companies themselves should start being transparent. What data made a decision? And if they don't know what data made a decision, they shouldn't be making a decision using the data. I don't care how accurate their systems are at predicting something. If they don't understand how it works under the hood and it's impacting someone monetarily, financially, declining them getting a house or getting car insurance, you know, it's really important that we don't turn into a fully data-driven culture, that we still have people looking at the books and looking at relevant data.
Oh, it's working. That was a great talk, by the way. One question I had kind of along the same thread. So you mentioned their Experian, and a lot of people have to use that whenever they're buying a house and things these days to get bank loans. Have you seen alternatives being used? Like, is there any countries that we should look at to lead by example, that sort of thing? Just curious on your thoughts around that.
Yeah, so I don't think we should use Experian. All of your data is contained in your banks. So there's this thing called kind of federated machine learning or federated data sources, which means your data is completely local to one source. If you're looking to get a mortgage or make a financial decision, let all your data be local to your bank. It doesn't need to see everything else. It doesn't need to see what you spend your cash on. At the minute, the UK government are trying to pass a bill through Parliament that allows them to spy on people who have benefits accounts to look at what they're spending. And it's like, they're all saying, oh, it's because of fraud, we're looking for fraud. But it's not really. They have access to people's bank accounts. So the fact that the UK government are now starting to kind of go into people's bank accounts, it's kind of like Experian, you know. They're looking at data they shouldn't be looking at. Our banks should be a lot more stronger and secure by keeping our data solely to them. They don't need to give data to anyone else. You know, how many data points do we need to start making decisions? Probably 3. We don't need lots of data. We don't need to fully understand someone as a person. You know, these type of decisions have existed like centuries, where people have been looking for these things. Just because we have the data to now doesn't mean we should use it.
Any else? Yep, one more. Coming.
Hello, Megan. That was a lovely talk. I have a question on, you've said that you've shown us the amount of data that is available, but there's still talks ongoing on how we need more data to train AI and to enable innovation to go on. So I'm wondering, how do we get that balance you were saying between getting more data to train this AI, because it will be trained eventually and we need to continue innovating. We don't want to stifle it. So how do we balance obtaining or having enough data for that and our privacy?
Yeah, so this is also a kind of key thing that is looked alongside differential privacy. It's called federated machine learning. So what happens is you're taking, instead of like ChatGPT is doing its overconsumption of training data that's probably going to eat out and not have training data to continue, instead you're taking the data you think you could use. Say if you're training a chatbot for something specifically, say you're looking at, oh, I want my chatbot to talk about cooking and baking. You're just pulling cooking and baking in. You don't need to pull in all the other data sources that are talking about literature or English just to train it talking better. So by having these kind of federated, lots of little mini machine learning to high accuracy, that kind of gets over our need for greater amounts of data data, it's also a lot more eco-friendly. We're not training mass amounts of data on something that we need to do a small task, you know. I don't need my cookbook kind of AI to tell me about roadworks in Belfast city centre. So it's moving forward, there's a lot more decisions by federated because it's a lot more secure. Say if one of your systems went down, you still have all your other systems online, and it kind of has a longer life expectancy than models that train on everything.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Megan. I have never been so entertained and so terrified at the same time. But thank you.